that...
All right, what a world. What a world. And how much more of a world is there going to be, my friend?
Oh, yeah, quite a bit of it, unfortunately. It won't be anything close to what we planned, or maybe fortunately. I always like the idea of surprise, and I'm
True.
Of the opinion that there's a whole lot of surprises in store in very short order. So that'll be kind of cool. It'll be an interesting, fun period.
Does that mean we need to anesthetize ourselves to avoid shock overload, or get an extra IV drip bottle? What do we need?
There's the thing, though. A lot of the shock and the mental state, the problems we have now, are a result of the nature of the society and the civilization in which we live, not the nature of human beings in the world at large. Because human beings in the world at large would not of their own nature aggregate
probably
into
90% of this crap. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. If we weren't in a controlled state, we wouldn't move towards vast aggregations like the EU and the North American Union. Okay. In fact, the move is exactly the opposite to smaller, more manageable, decentralized kinds of form. And it was a push against that caused that the EU had to overcome. The EU, I was in Europe when they started that process, and it was I was there long before the European Community even was formed, and it was the European Trade Agreement. Okay, and so they started off with a NAFTA kind of a trade agreement, and it led to the EU. So when we have NAFTA here, it leads to the North American Union. But that is against the natural trend that humans are arriving at this particular point. Now, universe may be pushing us towards this natural trend of decentralization because it knows that it's about to take out all of our centralized facilities and our infrastructure. And so it may be kind of like trying to prime us a bit, saying, hey, y'all better get a lot of water stored because I'm going to do away with the reservoir, that sort of thing. I see a lot of patterns that seem to suggest that. And I think others also see this, and they're trying to profit on it. The Tavistock Group and, those kind of people of those ilk. Ilk.
Too nice a word for them. Tavistock.
Well, I can think of a lot nicer words for them, yeah. Unfortunately, radio doesn't accommodate that. A lot of the lines melt, that kind of thing, yeah.
Right. Okay, now, most people know Half Past Human for the ALTA work, the projections, the predictions, the forecasts, and all the rest of it. Yeah, so, look, nobody's perfect. You've hit some pretty amazing things, and there have been other things that have not manifested. But I want to point out again that what Clif does, with the aid of his computer bots and all the rest of it, is subjective. It is certainly a correlation, a collation of his own observations, feelings, and interpretive skills. Now, interpreting things is not easy. Under the best of circumstances. When you get into something as eclectic as the data that he works with, I don't know how you can come up with a real projection on much of anything, but you do. So what do we have? So now we have another year to face. What's you see anything on the radar
it won't be more of the same, okay?
It won't be more of the same.
No, it's not business as usual, and I'm going to disagree with individuals such as Catherine Austin Fitts, as much as I dearly love the woman, and Lindsey Williams, and I don't love him anywhere near as much as I do Catherine Austin Fitts. No offense to Lindsey.
Duly noted. I've got it written down here.
Okay, but in any event, I'm going to disagree with both of them because I don't think it's a slow burn. I think this year we're going to actually be hit by exogenous events outside the system that will basically take down the systemic infrastructure that we have.
Exogenous off planet, on planet, in between
planet?
That's
hard to, we have indications from the remote viewing, if you look at the work of the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild that was put together in the experiment and by the Farsight guys about this looking up of business.
All right,
now we have to understand we live in a world that would make the Byzantine chroniclers who tried to keep track of who was stabbing who in the back in the Byzantine Empire. It would make these people crazy trying to keep track of all the allegiances that are going on at all these various different levels.
Right.
But something is definitely up. The what we face this year is going to be extraordinary, not only in the Earth changes, which are already apparent. We have yet another super low about to hit England, where you have the polar vortex collapsing, and that may be permanent. That's scary. That means ice age is upon us.
Well, mini ice age. Robert Felix had been talking about that for quite a while, but the English seem to be on the front edge of it.
Yeah, and that's kind of a worrisome sign for the way in which the planet has a tendency to deal with water and ice. because you have to understand some things about, or it's necessary to think about things on a broad scale. So buildup of ice over England into Scotland that may reach up into the Faroe Islands and reconnect into Greenland at the same time that there's an ice mass loss across the backside, so to speak, the Alaska side of the polar ice cap means that that's the direction in which the feed tunnel, if you will, to the polar vortex will occur. Not a good thing for the Pacific Northwest or Alaska or any of this.
But it all depends, of course, about the projections of how warm the summer will be. If there's a melt, it'll go away. If there's not a sufficient melt, that's the beginning of an accumulation and aggregation of ice year after year.
Right.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, we've had actually indications that we're slipping into some of the Robert Felix kind of oscillations. We've had, for instance, in winter of 2011, 2012, in Britain, the cold weather was delayed, exceptionally so, such that it arrived late in winter. Now this year we've had exceptionally strong winters throughout Europe and Britain, and an exceptional cold period that's arriving very early for them. It'll probably hang around all the way through maybe March. So maybe even longer. That's the worrisome part. If it goes much on the equinox, then you're looking at the potential for one of those trigger years. And all it has to do is get into June, and then the distance between that and the next possible snow, say in the early December, is such that it's less than a complete season, and you get into this strange oscillation pattern that Asimov talked about in 1956 that leads directly to ice ages. Correct. And speaking of which, you just had a little commercial about permaculture, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that really has irritated me is I was standing up here waiting for you. I mean, this is past my bedtime, so I had to get up and do things. And I was doing dishes.
That too.
Did you? Yeah, no worries. But I was standing there doing dishes.
YouTube video, Cliff does dishes?
No, I do all the dishes, but I happened to be standing there while the television was on.
See, that was a play on Debbie Does Dallas. Cliff does.
There you go. Anyway, where this guy is, he's really smart. I think he's Australian or New Zealander. He'll have to forgive me if I've gotten that wrong. But what he has done is he's come up with this idea for a really interesting way of making steam using a water hammer. And a water hammer is a spinning device inside a very well-constructed pressure cage. And so it's sort of like a squirrel cage inside a tightly fitting metal housing. Okay, and the squirrel cage is solid with specialized kind of holes in it. And you have a very thin layer of water that goes between the squirrel cage and the inside of the pressure cage, and you simply spin it with an electric motor, and it actually hammers the water into steam and creates incredible amounts of heat off of very little tiny bits of electricity. It can actually be argued that it runs it over unity, because the amount of steam and pressure you get out of it is far greater than the amount of electricity used. And you could not use could not achieve that if you used any other form of mechanization to achieve the pressure and the temperature. You take far greater amounts of electricity. So just fascinating devices.
Yeah, somebody's taken the rocket mass heater idea and kind of made it look a little more pleasing and standardized. Looks like a water heater with a kind of a compartment on the bottom that you feed the combustibles into. It's called a ZAUG stove.
Yes. Now that's without the mass, okay? That's just simply the stove that can be used to fire boilers or all of the other units, right?
Yeah. They're playing variations on rocket mass, but
they're so off of the laminar flow issue, correct?
Yeah, very interesting. All right, good. Rocket mass heaters. Learn something new every day on this program. That's why I'm here, and we'll be back with Cliff after this. Okay, and we're back with Cliff, half-caste human. Now, a friend of ours sent me something that you said, ask you if you want to tell the story about. I think it was an Australian academic who was doing research into chemtrails and was told not to do any more research into chemtrails in a rather graphic way. A couple of people showed up in his office. Do you know this story?
No, I'm not sure that I'm with you on that one.
Well, hold on, let me see here. Maybe the guy's got the wrong guy. Anyway, here's the story, folks, in case you're wondering. A tenured professor in a university just completed a damning research project about chemtrails. When he arrived at his office the next morning, he found two agents next to his table. All of his books and belongings were already packed in boxes in his office. The agents showed him arrest papers for killing a little girl 4 days hence, with her photo included. They gave him the choice to either go home and forget about his research into chemtrails, or else. He went home and forgot about the whole project. And look, that may be a fiction, but it's not an exaggeration of how evil functions on this planet now. If you get in the way of somebody with a big agenda, seriously in the way, they're going to take you out. It's real simple.
You're given certain options. Yeah, my father encountered something like that in 67, 68. He found himself promoted into a position as a White House liaison and was part of he's a career officer in the United States military. And he got himself a position as a liaison to the White House. And I won't go into any of the details because they're not necessarily pertinent, but he found himself in a position of encountering something so despicable that his way out was to volunteer for a third tour in Vietnam. And so he led took a battalion over. And they did pretty much everything they could to make sure that he didn't come back. He did. Some pieces of him didn't, but he managed to make it back. But
well, see, there you go. And
this was Lyndon Johnson. He was in the Johnson White House in the thick of it all, and it was so abhorrent to him that he figured, well, he would volunteer for basically what they considered to be suicide, and that was acceptable to him.
That's how bad Johnson was. I'm not surprised. Wow. Political murders, corporate murders, greed murders, control murders, as common as periods and exclamation points in punctuation.
Well, actually, no, we've shifted over to suicides. You just don't have murders anymore. You have these just really inventive suicides, like that poor fellow who was so distraught about the destruction of Enron, and he was the chief financial officer. He shot himself twice in the head with 9-pellet rat shot, drug himself 35 feet across the driveway, opened up the garage door, stuck himself in the car, and shut the car door, and then opened the car door up again and put the gun in. All the while, of course, he was dead, but
No. That's called really wanting to kill yourself.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Vince Foster, who somehow shot himself through the head, managed to leap over 200 yards through the air after he was dead, I guess, maybe before, who's counting, hit the ground, didn't move, no blood, and no dirt from the park on the bottoms of his shoes.
Yeah.
So, we had, Ron Brown, the hole in the top of his head.
Well, and now we're into the more open form of the dirty war with the recent, basically, I don't want to say assassinations. Let's just start calling them disappearances in plain sight of, Aaron Swartz and the two gun activists. Sure. One of them was, local.
Oh, that unbelievable. Yeah. Guys driving in his own turf, back road, Georgia, dead. He had how many? 400 million views or something on I don't know what it was. Some phenomenal number of views on YouTube. It's just a simple guy who was a gun expert and had a personality and was looked up to and enjoyed.
Charismatic fellow and real straightforward. Right. Yeah.
Yep. No, disappearing in plain sight. Suicidings happen all the time. What about Janet Palfrey, the DC matter? Come on. Disgusting. And no one says anything. The Wellstones, warned by Dick Cheney, 3-4 weeks before, you better stop, Paul, or you're gonna be in trouble. And they killed it. Boom. Yeah. These things happen all the time, and no one says
we're also
anything.
seeing the escalation. Let's not forget we're seeing the thin edge of the wedge here with, the recent response directly to Alex Jones by Obama in his speech, as well as the attack on this, that nasty rabble-rouser Jay Widener and his buddy Jeff Rentz there.
Yeah,
by
two scoundrels, if there ever was one. Yeah, you saw that. Yeah, come on. Salon has nothing better to do.
That's my point. Somebody is pushing something. If you look at things at a very large manner, there's actually a disease that I could be claimed, that people could claim I suffer from, where you see patterns that don't exist. But I would claim that the manifestation of those patterns later on just merely means that I see them ahead of other people. One of the patterns I see developing is that, hey, something doesn't make sense here.
Right.
Let's look at the recent purge of the gun industry. Okay, I happen to drive out, and I have to haul my own trash over to the landfill here, right? And over near the landfill is this Cabela's store. And I stopped in and I got some targets, these little white paper targets I shoot my arrows at. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, I was talking to this fellow I know. He's about 36 now. I've known him for a couple of years. And I was commenting on the empty shelves of all the guns and stuff. And he said, yeah, they really got stripped clean here with this, rush to buy. Now, I live in a rural county. This is, sort of expected, even though we're a heavily Democratic state and so on. And there's a big rural component to the county I'm in, so I wasn't particularly surprised. But anyway, something he said really sort of tweaked my interest there, because he said that, he said, boy, his manager really was smart. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, we were up 20% on stock ahead of this, that they had so much stock that they were leaving stuff in boxes, weapons, guns of all different kinds, in boxes, in basically what little tiny backroom space they had.
And this was October, November-ish?
This is November, December-ish, okay, and he thought it was ahead of December, and he thought his manager was going to just get raked over the coals for making a bad decision in a poor economic year. Mm-hmm. Little did he know that the manager was actually anticipating on a January sale. Mm-hmm. How did they know, right? Mm-hmm. Well, my larger pattern says it's not about a gun grab. It was about flushing guns out into the hands of all of the Americans they could. Now, I have my reasons for thinking that there's some deeper level of conspiracy going on here, and it might even relate to here's a weird sort of a Robert Heinlein approach. If you were one of the guys who run the planet, and you knew that, 36 months from now, there's going to be these snarly, beastie space aliens landing in mass, and the best thing you could do would be to get as many guns into as many hands as possible now and distribute as much ammunition. Here's one way to do it without having to pay for it. Make everybody pay for it themselves by just giving them a particular fear and a reason to buy now.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that, snarly, bug bladder beast from Thrall are going to show up or anything like that, but there is some kind of a background story that is going on unobserved at the moment, because none of the other components make any sense. There has not been a completion. In our work, we have an emotional quantifier that has never failed us, and that's been this 58% of the forecast language showing up. And this time, it didn't even get to 9% of completion, and it just faded right away. So either there's a pending component to this meme, that, there's another shoe to drop, or there was some other purpose other than the more or less stated emotional one of, we're going to come and get your guns,
Well, it could well be a plank in a much bigger platform. You're right. This whole thing, Werner von Braun said it. The trump card will be the contrived ET invasion, and whether or not ET is actually involved kind of doesn't matter. They could do it. They've got the technology to do it anytime they want, if they want to do that kind of a thing. I don't know that they will or won't. I have no idea. Do you have any data that looks toward that kind of an eventuality?
Sure. Actually, we have all kinds of data indicating a reality along those lines, and that von Braun is inaccurate in the sense that the powers that be, may be wishing to have a fake invasion, but we had data as long ago as 2003 and 4 and 5 when we first formed our space goat fart sanity as a necessity, because of all this data coming in basically saying alien wars. And it was saying alien wars where there was going to be a reality involved, not merely an illusion. And let me tell you that the Russians have done some really interesting things recently. I was clued into this by a buddy of mine who's in Belarus. He's a teenager, late teens. He's really a bright kid, and we've been discussing some issues, and I was trying to he's building a Webbot program kind of a thing of his own, and I was giving him some hints and telling him how to look for things by their absence. And he went out and came back, and he said, hey, I think I found one, and sure enough, he has. And there's been this very interesting scrubbing of the Internet that's going on in a number of languages. It started with Cyrillic, so it's mostly been accomplished in the Russian language area of the Internet, but now it's moving on to the other areas, and it's also moving into the English language. And they're scrubbing something, and I'll tell you what it is, and you can go and look at it yourself, and I think I know why they're scrubbing it, too, and I'll tell you that as well. But they're scrubbing information about this Czechoslovakian inventor by the name of Robert, what's his name here, Pavlita. I'm dyslexic, so I learned it as Pal-Vita and had it wrong, but it's Pavlita. And he invented a number of devices that were like Reich's orgone accumulators. Only one of the things that he invented was a weapon that may indeed have been a sort of a cross between the Tesla death ray and the orgone accumulator kind of a thing, right?
What year is this approximately? When did he do this?
The 50s and 60s, and
okay.
He worked for like 35 years and was basically kept quiet. And then in the 68 uprising in Eastern Europe that spread through from Hungary, etc., when the Russians came on in, they snatched up a bunch of things, and they snatched up this fellow with all of his gear, and he had made these simple. Basically free energy devices, small tubes, no moving parts. They worked cold. They would qualify for cold fusion. You could aim them, charge them up with your own biological energy, and aim them at a flower, and the flower. That
sounds something like Trevor James Constable's tubes, a little bit.
I don't know about those. I only have come across the subject from this side. I've just run across his name as well, but haven't investigated any of his materials yet.
Yeah, worth looking at. Very interesting.
And I will. But in any event, what I think is going on here is an interesting component of this is that the clue to all of this was our cross-connection to the alien wars and the idea that the Russians, or maybe the black ops side of the secret breakaway civilization that started in the Russian military and may now be part of the pan-global breakaway civilization, have got a device that they're keeping ready for when these snarling aliens show up. And it is based on this Pavlita's work with these tubes.
Very interesting. I can't see anything in the current inventory that would be a real impediment to someone with advanced technology. This may be something that could be an equalizer.
There were apparently a great number of experiments that I've been reading about in the Cyrillic. I mean, I got some that were passed on to me before they got taken away from various websites, in which the experimenter, who was a Russian, had shown up and was talking to Pavlita, and the guy said he didn't have the heart to do it on anything larger, but he fried cockroaches and stuff from feet away, and they were like carbonized. They would sort of stop, their antenna would quiver, they'd sort of come to a grinding halt and sit there and quiver for a second, and then if he kept it on them with this tube, it sort of like sucked all the life force out of them, and you could go on over and touch them, and they would literally just turn into dust. It killed them from the inside out. And one of the things the Russians were fascinated with was, where did the water go? And because of the water and they've done by the perhaps 10,000 experiments by 72 or 73 on that aspect of it alone, because they thought there was an orthogonal rotation that actually destroyed the water. An interesting way to kill somebody.